so that they can also see the vision that I have and that I see and that many of my constituents see for these border communities. And so that they can also see how it's a win-win. And it doesn't matter if you're a Republican, independent, or a Democrat. It's about doing what's necessary for the communities that you represent. And at the end of the day, we end up representing everyone. I was thinking everything was very selfish. It was all about me and my wife. We had just dropped off our youngest son at the University of Texas. My two oldest daughters were already graduates, from Texas State University. So we were empty nesters, and we were thinking about us. And that took me into a different world where I really had to focus and say, if not now, then when? And then if I don't do it, then I don't have any more room to ever whine or complain about the status quo or what our region is getting or not getting. And so we rolled up our sleeves and we decided to run. And what we noticed is that, obviously the infrastructure needs of the community were the most important. Transportation, especially when you're 2 hours away, 2.5 hours away from a big city like San Antonio, and Highway 57 connects us. We knew that there were a lot of improvements that were needed there. You have infrastructure needs. You have water lines, sewer lines that are needed. You need improvements on the border. And almost felt like for the last 30, 40, 50 years, the last place that Austin and the legislature has focused on is on the border. And I think that needed to be the message. I represent 9 out of the 14 counties that share a border with Mexico. I have over 770 miles of a shared border with Mexico. And so I knew that even though I just didn't want to be that Hispanic guy that focused on the border, and I have, the practice of law behind me, drafting legislation representing, municipalities and local governments, like Eagle Pass Water Works, the Eagle Pass Housing Authority, the Maverick County Hospital District, the city of Eagle Pass, and providing general counsel work, the city of Brackettville also. And so those experiences all shaped me in figuring out what those local communities and local governments needed and what we could do to make sure that we delivered the resources, the funding, and the grants that were needed for areas that had the potential for growth. And I really do think if we stop demonizing the border and we really focused and would reach out across the border and work with our partners, they're the largest trading partners for the state of Texas and the United States. Just think what we could do if we've had this border corridor where it would be easier for us to ingress and egress from this border area. Let's say we set up a 50-mile wide area and we provided all these economic growth, all these opportunities. And COVID shaped us to have this very future and this vision that I see for what the border can be, because we then decided that we needed to move away from India and from China, and that we needed to make sure that we had all these products closer to us. And with the new NAFTA agreement, I think it also helped us shape the ability to connect with Mexico. There's billions of dollars that is being invested in Mexico on the northern states for all this growth. There's companies that are even outside of Mexico that are making these investments. All of that is going to splurge and is going to seep into the Texas side. These are great times for the border, especially for places like Eagle Pass, Del Rio, Presidio, and El Paso. But it's up to us to make sure that now that we've been handed this baton, that we move forward and that we really push the envelope on what we can do as border communities, and that we redouble our efforts and our investments into infrastructure. Think of the problems that it causes somebody like a state representative with respect to the infrastructure needs that we will need for the next 15 years. But it's a great problem. I see it as a great problem for me to have, because it really just energizes my team and I to start finding and working with the governor, working with the Speaker of the House, working with the Lieutenant Governor, so that they can also see the vision that I have and that I see and that many of my constituents see for these border communities. And so that they can also see how it's a win-win. And it doesn't matter if you're a Republican, independent, or a Democrat. It's about doing what's necessary for the communities that you represent. And at the end of the day, we end up representing everyone, whether, you win by 51% or 56% or 70%. You end up representing every one of those community members, including those that didn't vote for you. And I think more than anything, even those that don't vote for you, at least they want to feel like you are there, and at least you will hear them out and will take their input into making the decisions that we have to make up there in Austin. You know, here in Maverick County, as an example, Biden last time won with 51% of the vote. I got 70% of the vote. The people that know me in my community will have that crossover vote. They'll know. So we supported the legislation that provided for additional funding to secure our public schools with either equipment, shatterproof windows, more security, more personnel. But I at the end of the day, I think that's already been done for the most part. Almost every school has a security guard and has safety measures in place. In fact, Uvalde, which is only 45 minutes away, had the safety measures in place, of those doors that would lock automatically. And unfortunately, it didn't work as it was intended. And then also, we have now received information as to whether law enforcement, which I fully support law enforcement. I've been endorsed by law enforcement as one of the few Democrats on the board also to receive the endorsements of the two largest law enforcement agencies at the state level. But I think it's also important to talk about what went right and what went wrong so that we don't do this again. And the fact that law enforcement were concerned about going in because this individual in Uvalde had a high ammunition assault rifle type weapon that they were also concerned and scared about, and rightfully so. I don't in any way mean to demean them in that position. I think it just shows that we have a problem in America with assault rifles and that we need to do that. And if we were to implement the assault rifle ban at the congressional level, I think we would start seeing those numbers drop. I'm a strong believer of the Second Amendment. I voted for HB 1927, which was, for you to be able to to open carry, because my citizens, especially out there, my constituents out there in West Texas, initially I was against it. I thought, as a concealed handgun permit holder, my wife and I, we thought everybody needs to go through some courses and understanding how to handle their weapon. But the more and more as the legislative process went through, we kept getting calls out from West Texas. One, it's very rural. Two, if you can even get a cell phone signal, it'll take 20, 30, 40 minutes for law enforcement or first responders to get out there. So many of my constituents were saying, I need this to be able to carry and protect myself. And so we shifted our focus and the way we stood on that legislation and ultimately supported it because I listened to those folks out in West Texas. And so, but at the same time, I think when you go out there and have these meet and greets and town hall meetings, even conservatives and even Republicans that are elected, either county judges or sheriffs, will tell you there is nothing wrong with a universal background check. There is nothing wrong with, banning assault rifles. Do you think a law enforcement officer wants to respond to an emergency call and know that more than likely they can be on the receiving end of an assault rifle type gun exchange? Of course not. And so if we can help law enforcement in that way and make sure that they get back to their families at the end of the day, and if we can also help and protect the constituents, I think we can protect the Second Amendment and at the same time protect our constituents. We were instrumental in passing legislation. Judge Hennington out in Brewster County, he was a director of the EMS services out there. And he was able to get everyone out in West Texas, a number of the counties together, and invited us also. We were there a full day throwing stuff up on the board, what would work, what wouldn't. And we came up with a plan. There was about 20 folks up there. And it was great to see the ideas being thrown around by those local folks as to what the needs were. We have a service right now in place out there in West Texas, an EMS service where one unit would go out of Brewster and there was another emergency call. It would take 20, 30, 40 minutes to get another unit out there to that other location. And so we needed to make sure that we put the right resources and drafted legislation that would allow them to garner additional funds so that then they could expand on their EMS and their healthcare services. And we were, along with Senator Blanco's help on the Senate side, I passed it through the House and he was able to pass it through the Senate. Another thing was we came to find out from those discussions that the EMS drivers also had to be certified. And so you're already facing a dire situation when you don't have enough personnel out there. And now you have to impose these additional requirements, even though the EMS driver is just driving the EMS truck. And so we made an exemption and drafted legislation to waive that requirement for certification for communities like those in rural Texas. And so we were able to pass that legislation also, which would now make it easier for fire and EMS and ambulance services out there in West Texas to be able to acquire the drivers without the certification needed to perform more of these emergency services, but still provide the driving capabilities to get somebody to the right treatment. And so it was that sort of legislation I think that we needed. More than anything, I just think it's weird that in this day and age and at this time, we are losing and have $900 million parked at the federal level that could come to the state of Texas. Those are Texas taxpayers' monies. And we could expand Medicaid with that, which would then also help with more money in the pool. Then it lowers everybody's Affordable Care Act bills. And to know that it is being done out of spite just because there were certain Republican governors that all bound together and trying to make the Affordable Care Act like it was not going to work. I think the reality is, and more, even the Republican governors have figured out like, man, those monies would really come in handy in my state. And now we're one of those, I think there's now 10 states still Republican controlled with the governor that refuse to accept these federal funds. Whenever we only have to put 10% to the 90% that the federal government sends your way. Think what that would do to expanding access to healthcare in West Texas, to telemedicine, to mental health awareness, to making sure that there's $900 million that is circulating in the state of Texas. Think about how many doctors we'd be able to hire when we already have a shortfall. I'm on the Healthcare Select Reform Committee, and so we received extensive information and data from witnesses as far as just how dire the situation is that we don't have enough, we're not graduating enough doctors. And so nurses, phlebotomists, lab techs, all of that. Think about what 900 million would do, the economic growth that would stimulate the economy. And again, the focus would be in, hopefully in all of Texas, but also on the border where we have some of the highest uninsured rates with respect to constituents. So that's the aim. And I would hope that, just talking common sense ideas with our constituents and with the general public will get us to that point where they understand that regardless of party affiliation, it's about doing the right thing and making sure that our constituents are getting better services when it comes to healthcare. Are making sure that their infrastructure needs are being met, and that they have public servants and leaders that are focusing on the continued growth and the continued future of their communities, and making sure that public education dollars are well spent also, and that we're taking care of our teachers and giving the salary increases. Right now, we're at a point where the governor is holding $32 billion hostage because he wants to pass these private vouchers. Systematically, state leadership has defunded public education for the last 10, 15 years. They have created this issue of public schools not working, only to now come in and be like the saviors and say, look, we will save it by taking additional money from public education and putting it into private schools for private vouchers. But we're not. The problem with that is that the legislation that is being proposed was not going to put public schools and these private schools on the same level, on the same par. There was going to be a lot of opportunities for private schools, for example, to make decisions on not accepting certain troubled kids and special needs kids. They could discriminate based on sex, race, religion. All those amendments were tried on the Senate side to be added, and they continuously refused. Thank God it didn't pass, and we had Republican support from Republicans that were rural, that understand that in the rural communities, public schools are the Friday night lights. They are the largest employer. They are the glue that binds the community together. And so it's unfortunate that 20 of those reasonable Republicans were challenged in the primary by the governor, and you saw many of them, unfortunately, because of of the primary in the way that the Republican primary, many of them lost. But I'm glad that Speaker Phelan was able to keep his seat. I truly believe that he will be the speaker again, and that he allows Republicans and Democrats to be able to work through legislation, even though while he's still conservative. But I still think that he gives us an opportunity. He understands the border. So I think we can do great things. I think if we can continue to reach across the aisle and work with Republicans, independents, and Democrats, we can have a better, bigger, brighter future for Texas, a vision of Texas that I think that we're all geared up. And now with Hispanics representing the largest minority with 44% here in Texas, we're 52% of the public student body, plus the 12% that African American. We are now at 64% minorities that form in public education. So when we need the money the most, because most of those individuals in the minorities are middle class, is when we have state government trying to take even more money away and not give teachers a salary increase. And I think that's a wrong message. I frankly am a product of public education. I owe everything, of course, to my parents and what they instilled in us as far as the values, but also to our teachers for not letting us off the hook. I had honors and gifted and talented classes, and at times you feel during that time, all those things I think play a factor. And I love the teachers that I had. I supported Operation Lone Star, for example. I was the only Democrat that joint authored it the last two legislative sessions. But the way that Governor Abbott is currently going through it right now, I think he's overstepping the bounds of what Operation Lone Star was supposed to be. So obviously we need to make sure that we put some parameters there in place this next legislative cycle. And we've spent over $12 billion of our Texas taxpayers' money. And what do we have to show for it? There's still, obviously, the numbers have dropped considerably since the late December. And it's because the White House finally listening to Texas public servants and going and working out an agreement out there with the president of Mexico. But it's still not sustainable, and we need to fix our immigration system, and we need to make sure that we continue to push for that border security bill that the Republicans just failed to take a vote in January of this year, and then I think in March again when they had an opportunity up there in Congress. We need to hold them accountable. If they truly are concerned about the border, we need to make sure that border security is one of the first steps, and then that we fix our broken immigration systems, and then we update the number of visas that are allowable, and make it easier for people to come and work and make sure that they're paying into the system but not taking from the system. I think that those are some of the conditions that, for example, the more conservative constituents would like to make sure that is being considered as far as immigrants coming in here. We need to remind everyone we're a nation of immigrants, but we need to do it orderly. And right now, having these individuals still cross through the bridge, we're creating a system that's actually become a billion-dollar system for the bad guys, for the drug cartels and the human smugglers. So we need to take that element away from them and make sure that we do it, and we do it the right way.